Hey guys, tonight we're exploring a story that everyone in history should know. The story is King Tutankhamun, the mystery of his tomb and death. You get comfortable, take a moment, like the video, and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. King Tutankhamun, the mystery of his tomb and death. Imagine standing in the middle of Egypt's vast desert. The sun burns overhead. The wind carries grains of sand across the ancient rocks, and silence stretches for miles. Beneath that silence lies a world that remained hidden for more than 3,000 years. Countless kings were buried beneath these cliffs, surrounded by unimaginable treasures, mysterious symbols, and secrets that time itself seemed unable to erase. Among all those rulers, one name continues to capture the imagination of the world more than almost any other: King Tutankhamun. It is remarkable because Tutankhamun was not the greatest warrior of ancient Egypt. He did not build the largest temples, conquer vast empires, or rule for decades like many famous pharaohs before him. His reign was short. His life ended before reaching adulthood, and for centuries his name was nearly forgotten. Yet today, millions know his name. Why? Because his tomb became one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in human history. When British archaeologist Howard Carter opened the entrance to Tutankhamun's burial chamber in 1922, he stepped into a room untouched for over 3,000 years. Gold glittered in the light of his candle. Beautiful furniture, statues, jewelry, weapons, chariots, ceremonial objects, and the famous golden mask surrounded the young king. Nothing like it had ever been discovered. Most royal tombs in Egypt had been robbed long before archaeologists arrived. Treasures disappeared centuries earlier, melted down for gold, or stolen by thieves desperate for wealth. Tutankhamun's tomb, however, remained largely intact. Suddenly, the world became fascinated. Who was this young king? Why had his tomb survived? How did he die? And why did strange stories begin spreading about a curse connected to everyone who disturbed his resting place? These questions transformed Tutankhamun from an almost forgotten ruler into one of history's greatest mysteries. To understand his story, we must travel back more than 3,000 years to one of the most dramatic periods in Egyptian history. Ancient Egypt was already an old civilization when Tutankhamun was born. The pyramids at Giza were ancient monuments even to the Egyptians themselves. Dynasties had risen and fallen. Powerful pharaohs had expanded the kingdom far beyond the Nile Valley. Temples honored dozens of gods, priests held enormous influence, and the entire kingdom revolved around traditions that had existed for centuries. Religion shaped every part of Egyptian life. People believed the gods controlled nature, the flooding of the Nile, the harvest, the weather, health, and even life after death. Every temple, every ceremony, and every royal decision reflected those beliefs. The pharaoh was not simply a king. He was believed to be chosen by the gods and responsible for maintaining balance, throughout the universe. This balance was known as Ma'at. Ma'at represented truth, justice, harmony, and order. Without it, Egyptians believed chaos would consume the world. For generations, this system remained remarkably stable. Then everything changed. A revolutionary ruler appeared who challenged thousands of years of tradition. His name was Akhenaten. Instead of worshiping the many gods of Egypt, Akhenaten elevated one deity above all others, the Aten, represented by the sun's disk. Temples dedicated to traditional gods were closed. Powerful priests lost influence. Ancient rituals were abandoned. Entire cities changed. Even Egyptian art transformed dramatically, showing the royal family in a more natural and unusual style, unlike anything seen before. Some historians describe this as one of the world's earliest attempts at monotheism, although scholars continue debating exactly how Akhenaten's religious system should be understood. Whatever the case, his revolution divided Egypt. Many people resisted the changes. Traditional priests hated losing power. Old customs disappeared almost overnight. Political stability weakened. Foreign territories became harder to control. When Akhenaten's reign came to an end, Egypt faced uncertainty, unlike anything experienced for generations. It was into this unstable world that Tutankhamun entered history. At birth, he was likely named Tutankhaten, meaning living image of the Aten. His original name reflected the religious revolution started by Akhenaten. Yet even the identity of Tutankhamun's parents remains one of history's enduring mysteries. For decades, scholars debated whether Akhenaten was truly his father. Modern DNA studies strongly suggest that Akhenaten was indeed Tutankhamun's father, while his mother appears to have been one of Akhenaten's sisters, whose exact identity is still uncertain. This close family relationship was not unusual among Egyptian royalty. Royal families often married brothers and sisters to preserve what they believed was the purity of the divine bloodline. However, such repeated intermarriage may also have contributed to inherited health problems. Centuries later, modern scientific investigations would uncover evidence suggesting that Tutankhamun may have suffered from several physical conditions during his short life. As a child, Tutankhamun grew up inside the royal court, surrounded by luxury beyond imagination. Servants attended every need. Teachers instructed him in language, religion, politics, diplomacy, military traditions, and ceremonial duties. Priests explained the responsibilities expected of future rulers. Artists created magnificent decorations throughout the palaces. Musicians entertained the royal family. Everything around him reminded him that one day he might rule Egypt. But no amount of education could prepare a child for the enormous political storm that surrounded the kingdom. The old religion demanded restoration. Supporters of Akhenaten wished to preserve his reforms. Priests sought to regain their lost influence. Military leaders wanted stability. Foreign enemies watched carefully for signs of weakness. Every powerful figure had different ambitions. Some historians believe that influential advisors began shaping the young prince's future long before he wore the royal crown. Among those advisors, two names would later become especially important: Ai and Horemheb. Both men possessed experience, political influence, and deep understanding of Egypt's government. Both would eventually play critical roles in the kingdom's future. Neither could have imagined that the young boy they advised would become the most famous pharaoh in history, not because of military victories, but because of the extraordinary mystery surrounding his life, his tomb, and his death. As the years passed, the young prince found himself living in a kingdom that seemed divided between two different worlds. One world still remembered the traditions that had guided Egypt for nearly 2,000 years. The other had been reshaped by Akhenaten's bold religious revolution. Every temple, every palace, and every council meeting reflected that tension. Tutankhamun was still only a child when events moved faster than anyone could have expected. Akhenaten disappeared from history, and the royal succession became confusing. Some historians believe there may have been one or even two short-lived rulers before Tutankhamun officially became pharaoh. The historical record is incomplete, leaving many questions unanswered. What is clear is that a boy, probably around 8 or 9 years old, suddenly became ruler of one of the richest and most powerful kingdoms on earth. Although he wore the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, real political authority almost certainly rested with experienced adults. Men like Ai, an elderly court official with decades of experience, and Horemheb, Egypt's respected military commander, helped guide the government. They understood that the kingdom needed stability more than anything else. One of the first and most important decisions of the young king's reign was to reverse many of Akhenaten's religious reforms. This decision changed history. The royal court abandoned the exclusive worship of the Aten and restored the traditional gods, especially Amun, whose priests had once held enormous influence. Temples that had been neglected began receiving support again. Statues of ancient gods returned to public ceremonies. Priests resumed rituals that had been interrupted for years. The young king even changed his own name. Tutankhamun became Tutankhamun. That single change symbolized the restoration of the old religious order. His new name meant living image of Amun, honoring the god whose worship had once dominated Egypt. His queen also changed her name. Ankhesenpaten became Enkhsenamun, reflecting the same religious shift. These name changes were far more than personal choices. They were political statements meant to reassure the people that Egypt was returning to the traditions that had made the kingdom strong. The capital city established by Akhenaten gradually lost its importance. Government officials returned to older centers of power, especially Memphis and Thebes. Craftsmen once employed to decorate the new capital found themselves working once again on temples dedicated to the traditional gods. To ordinary Egyptians, this restoration may have felt like a return to normal life after years of uncertainty. Yet behind the scenes, the kingdom still faced serious challenges. Egypt's influence abroad had weakened during Akhenaten's reign. Some territories in Syria and Canaan had become unstable. Local rulers who had once depended on Egyptian military support now questioned whether the pharaoh could still protect them. Letters discovered by archaeologists reveal desperate appeals for military assistance during this period. Some neighboring kingdoms took advantage of Egypt's internal problems, expanding their own influence, while the young king's government struggled to regain control. Horemheb, as commander of the army, likely spent considerable effort rebuilding military strength. Although Tutankhamun is sometimes shown defeating enemies in royal artwork, many historians believe these images followed traditional artistic conventions rather than recording actual military campaigns led personally by the young king. Ancient Egyptian art often portrayed every pharaoh as a victorious warrior, regardless of age or battlefield experience. Inside the royal palace, Tutankhamun's daily life followed a carefully organized routine. Before sunrise, servants prepared the king's clothing and ceremonial regalia. Every piece of jewelry, every collar, every sandal carried symbolic meaning. Gold reflected the flesh of the gods, while precious stones represented protection, strength, and divine authority. Priests conducted rituals to honor the gods before important state business began. Officials arrived carrying reports from every corner of the kingdom. Tax collections, agricultural harvests, construction projects, foreign diplomacy, legal disputes, and temple administration all required attention. Even if experienced advisors made many practical decisions, the authority of the pharaoh remained essential. Every official act was performed in the king's name. Tutankhamun also participated in religious festivals, processions, and public ceremonies. These events reinforced the belief that the pharaoh maintained harmony between the gods and the people. Meanwhile, artists and craftsmen created magnificent objects for the royal household. The level of skill achieved by Egyptian artisans during this period remains astonishing even today. Furniture was decorated with ebony, ivory, and gold. Chariots combined beauty with engineering precision. Jewelry displayed remarkable craftsmanship using turquoise, lapis lazuli, carnelian, and colored glass. Weapons balanced elegance with practicality. Many of these masterpieces would eventually accompany Tutankhamun into his tomb, remaining hidden for over 3,000 years. The young king's marriage to Ankhesenamun also played an important role in maintaining royal legitimacy. Like many marriages within Egypt's royal family, theirs strengthened claims to the throne and preserved dynastic continuity. Historical evidence suggests that the couple hoped to produce heirs, but tragedy struck. Inside Tutankhamun's tomb, archaeologists discovered the tiny mummified remains of 2 infant daughters. Modern examinations indicate that both babies were stillborn or died shortly before or after birth. These heartbreaking discoveries offer a deeply personal glimpse into the lives of the young royal couple. Despite unimaginable wealth and divine status, they experienced grief just like ordinary families. The loss of potential heirs also created uncertainty about Egypt's future. Without surviving children, the question of succession became increasingly important. No one could know that this uncertainty would soon become one of the greatest political crises of the dynasty. At the same time, another mystery quietly surrounded the young king: his health. For generations, people imagined Tutankhamun as a healthy teenage ruler cut down suddenly by violence or assassination. Modern science paints a more complicated picture. Examinations of his mummy suggest that he may have suffered from several physical conditions. Some researchers believe he had a clubfoot or another condition affecting one of his feet. More than 100 walking sticks were discovered inside his tomb, many showing signs of actual use rather than serving as ceremonial decorations. If true, this suggests that the young king may have depended on walking staffs throughout much of his life. DNA studies also indicate that Tutankhamun contracted malaria, a disease that still affects millions of people today. Whether malaria alone caused his death remains uncertain, but it may have weakened an already fragile body. Some scholars believe repeated royal intermarriage contributed to inherited health problems. Others argue that the available evidence should be interpreted cautiously because ancient mummies often present complex challenges for modern medical analysis. The truth remains uncertain. That uncertainty has only added to the fascination surrounding Tutankhamun. Was he a sickly young ruler struggling with chronic illness? Or was he healthier than modern interpretations sometimes suggest? The evidence continues to be debated. One fact, however, is beyond dispute. His reign was brief. Before reaching adulthood, the young pharaoh's life would come to a sudden and mysterious end, leaving behind questions that scientists, historians, doctors, archaeologists, and investigators are still trying to answer more than 3,000 years later. And with his death, an extraordinary chain of events would begin, one that would eventually lead to the creation of the most famous royal tomb in the history of archaeology. No one recorded the exact moment when the young pharaoh's life came to an end. There are no eyewitness accounts describing his final hours, no detailed royal diary explaining the illness that overcame him, and no official inscription clearly stating the cause of his death. For one of the world's most famous kings, the silence surrounding his final days is extraordinary. Historians estimate that Tutankhamun died at around 18 or 19 years of age. By modern standards, he had barely reached adulthood. In ancient Egypt, however, he had already spent years carrying the title of Pharaoh, the living representative of the gods. His death must have shocked the royal court. A young king with no surviving heir had suddenly disappeared. Questions immediately followed. Who would rule Egypt next? Had the king died from natural causes? Was it an accident? Or had someone ensured that the throne would soon become vacant? These questions have echoed across more than 3,000 years. One of the earliest theories suggested that Tutankhamun had been murdered. For decades, this idea captured the public imagination. When early examinations of his mummy appeared to reveal damage to the back of his skull, some researchers believed the young king had been struck on the head. Books, documentaries, and films repeated the possibility of assassination. The image of a secret conspiracy inside the royal palace seemed almost irresistible. After all, many powerful individuals stood to benefit from the king's death. The elderly royal advisor eventually became pharaoh, Horemheb, the commander of Egypt's army, would later become king as well. Both men possessed influence, experience, and political ambition. Some writers imagined hidden rivalries, secret plots, and palace betrayals. But as medical technology improved, many of those early conclusions began to change. Modern CT scans provided a much clearer view of the mummy than earlier examinations had ever been able to achieve. Researchers discovered that much of the damage to the skull likely occurred long after Tutankhamun's death. During the mummification process, priests inserted resins and removed certain tissues. Later, when archaeologists unwrapped the mummy in the 20th century, additional damage occurred as they struggled to separate the body from hardened resins that had effectively glued it to the coffin. The supposed fatal blow to the head became far less convincing. Attention shifted elsewhere. Another injury attracted enormous interest. Tutankhamun's left leg showed a serious fracture above the knee. At first, historians wondered whether the injury happened after death. Later studies suggested it may have occurred shortly before he died. If that is correct, the broken leg could have become infected. Without antibiotics, even a relatively simple injury could become life-threatening in the ancient world. Some researchers proposed that the king fell from a chariot while hunting or during military training. Ancient Egyptian royalty loved chariot driving. It demonstrated skill, courage, and athletic ability. Royal artwork frequently showed pharaohs racing across battlefields or hunting dangerous animals from lightweight chariots. Could Tutankhamun have suffered a terrible accident? The idea seemed possible. Yet once again, certainty proved impossible. Other experts pointed out that there is limited direct evidence connecting the fracture to a chariot crash. Some argued that the injury alone cannot explain every aspect of his death. Then came another remarkable development. Scientists successfully extracted DNA from several royal mummies. The results offered surprising new clues. Tutankhamun tested positive for genetic evidence of malaria caused by the parasite Plasmodium falciparum, one of the deadliest forms of the disease. Malaria weakens the body, causes high fever, chills, exhaustion, and can become fatal without treatment. If the young king already suffered from physical health problems, malaria may have placed enormous strain on his body. Some researchers now believe the most likely explanation is not a dramatic assassination, but a combination of factors: a weakened immune system, inherited medical conditions, a severe leg injury, and malaria. Together, these may have overwhelmed the young king. Still, the mystery has never been completely solved. There are historians who continue to question whether every piece of evidence has been interpreted correctly. Ancient mummies are difficult to study. Thousands of years of environmental damage, ancient embalming techniques, and modern excavation methods all complicate forensic analysis. Every new scientific investigation answers some questions while raising others. As uncertainty surrounded the cause of death, another crisis unfolded inside the palace. Egypt suddenly had no direct heir. The queen, Ankhesenamun, found herself in an extraordinarily dangerous position. One of the most remarkable documents from the ancient world tells part of this story. According to Hittite records, an Egyptian queen sent a desperate message to the Hittite king, Suppiluliuma I. She wrote that her husband had died, she had no son. She begged the Hittite ruler to send one of his princes so she could marry him and make him king of Egypt. The letter expressed fear of being forced to marry one of her own servants. Most historians believe this queen was almost certainly Ankhesenamun. If true, her request was unprecedented. Egyptian royalty rarely, if ever, invited a foreign prince to become pharaoh. The Hittite king reportedly doubted the letter's authenticity at first. He suspected a trap. After further investigation, he eventually agreed to send one of his sons, Prince Zananza. The prince never reached Egypt. Somewhere along the journey, he died. Whether he was murdered, died in an accident, or fell victim to political intrigue remains unknown. The Hittite king blamed Egypt. Relations between the two great powers deteriorated. Meanwhile, back in Egypt, I became pharaoh. Some evidence even suggests that A married Ankhesenamun after Tutankhamun's death, although the historical record remains incomplete. Soon afterward, Ankhesenamun herself disappeared from history. No confirmed tomb, no clear records of her final years. One of ancient Egypt's queens simply vanished from the historical record. The mysteries surrounding Tutankhamun had already begun multiplying. His death remained uncertain. His widow disappeared. A foreign prince died before reaching Egypt. A trusted advisor claimed the throne, and yet the greatest mystery of all still lay ahead. The preparations for Tutankhamun's burial would create a tomb unlike any other ever discovered. A tomb that would sleep beneath the sands of Egypt for more than 3,000 years, preserving treasures so extraordinary that they would forever change the history of archaeology. The death of a pharaoh was never treated as the end of a life. In ancient Egyptian belief, it marked the beginning of another journey. To the Egyptians, death was not disappearance. It was a passage into the eternal world, where the king would continue to exist among the gods. But reaching that world safely required careful preparation. Every ritual, every prayer, every object placed inside the tomb had a purpose. For Tutankhamun, those preparations began almost immediately after his death. The first responsibility fell to the royal embalmers. These specialists were among the most respected craftsmen in Egypt. They understood the sacred traditions of mummification that had been refined over many centuries. Their work was considered both a science and a religious duty. The process lasted about 70 days. The body was taken to a special place known as the Per Nefer, often translated as the House of Beauty. Despite its peaceful name, it was here that the long and delicate work of preserving the king's body began. The embalmers carefully washed the body with water from the Nile and purified it, using palm wine and fragrant oils. Every movement followed religious tradition. One of the first major steps involved removing the brain. Using a slender metal instrument inserted through the nose, they carefully broke through the thin bone separating the nasal passage from the skull. Much of the brain tissue was then extracted. Although modern medicine recognizes the brain as the center of intelligence, Ancient Egyptians believed the heart, not the brain, was the seat of thought, memory, and emotion. For that reason, the heart was usually left inside the body. It would one day be weighed against the feather of Ma'at during the great judgment in the afterlife. If the heart proved pure and truthful, the deceased could enter eternal life. If it failed, the terrifying creature Amit would devour it forever. Next came the removal of the internal organs. A careful incision was made along the left side of the abdomen. The lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines were removed, cleaned, treated with natron, wrapped in fine linen, and placed inside beautifully decorated canopic containers protected by the four sons of Horus. Each organ had its own divine guardian. Nothing was left to chance. Every prayer sought protection against dangers waiting beyond death. The empty body cavity was then cleaned and filled with linen, resin, spices, and aromatic materials to help preserve its shape. Finally, the body itself was covered with natron, a naturally occurring salt found in Egypt's deserts. For 40 days, the natron slowly removed moisture from the body. Without moisture, decay slowed dramatically. Thousands of years later, that remarkable process would still allow scientists to examine Tutankhamun's remains. Once dehydration was complete, the embalmers gently removed the natron and began restoring the body's appearance. Soft linen padding filled areas that had shrunk. Precious oils softened the skin. Resins sealed the wrappings. Then came one of the most recognizable stages of Egyptian mummification. Layer after layer of fine linen bandages surrounded the young king. Between those layers, priests placed magical amulets. Each carried a different purpose. Some protected the throat. Others guarded the heart. Some defended against poisonous creatures. Others promised rebirth with the rising sun. Ancient Egyptians believed that words themselves possessed power. Priests recited sacred spells while wrapping the body, ensuring every amulet fulfilled its divine purpose. The famous Book of the Dead contained many of these protective texts, although individual tombs often included customized selections. Tutankhamun's mummy received extraordinary care. Gold finger stalls covered his fingers. Gold toe coverings protected his feet. Beautiful jewelry surrounded his neck and chest. Multiple nested coffins awaited him. The innermost coffin, crafted from solid gold, would become one of the greatest masterpieces ever created in ancient Egypt. Its craftsmanship astonishes visitors even today. The king's face appears peaceful. His eyes seem calm. The royal Neme's headdress rests upon his brow. The cobra and vulture, the symbols of Upper and Lower Egypt, rise proudly from the forehead and declaring eternal kingship. Covering the face rested another masterpiece, the golden funerary mask. Fashioned from solid gold and decorated with lapis lazuli, quartz, obsidian, colored glass, and precious stones, the mask was not simply a portrait. It represented divine transformation. It showed the young king not as a weak human being, but as an eternal ruler, united with Osiris, Lord of the afterlife. Its serene expression, has become one of the most recognizable images in world history. Yet despite the beauty of these treasures, something unusual surrounded Tutankhamun's burial. His tomb was surprisingly small. Compared with the vast burial complexes prepared for many earlier pharaohs, Tutankhamun's tomb appeared modest. Why? One possibility is that his unexpected death left little time to complete a grand royal tomb. Construction of large royal tombs often required many years. Since Tutankhamun died unexpectedly at such a young age, the burial chamber prepared for him may originally have been intended for someone else before being adapted for the young king. Some Egyptologists have even suggested that parts of the tomb may originally have belonged to a high-ranking royal woman. This theory remains debated, but the unusual layout continues to attract attention. Despite its modest size, the tomb overflowed with riches: furniture, beds, chairs, thrones, statues, weapons, walking sticks, clothing, jewelry, games, food, wine, perfumes, model boats, chariots, everything the king might need for eternity. More than 5,000 individual objects were eventually cataloged. Each reflected astonishing artistic skill. Each carried religious meaning. Each remained untouched beneath the sands for more than 3 millennia. After the funeral ceremonies ended, workers sealed the entrance. Heavy stones blocked access. Official seals marked the doorway. The young king's earthly journey had ended. His eternal journey had begun. Or so everyone believed. None of those present could have imagined that thieves would soon attempt to enter the tomb. Nor could they have guessed that, despite those attempts, the burial chamber would remain hidden from the world until a determined archaeologist named Howard Carter began searching for a forgotten king whose name had almost vanished from history. The greatest archaeological discovery of the 20th century was still more than 3,000 years away. For centuries after Tutankhamun's burial, the Valley of the Kings remained the sacred resting place of Egypt's greatest rulers. Hidden among towering limestone cliffs on the west bank of the Nile, the valley was chosen because it was isolated, difficult to reach, and protected by the surrounding desert. The Egyptians believed this was the ideal place for a king to begin his eternal journey. When the workers sealed Tutankhamun's tomb, they likely believed no one would ever disturb it again. History had other plans. Only a short time after the burial, tomb robbers found evidence that a newly buried king rested beneath the desert floor. Gold, precious stones, and valuable oils could make a thief unimaginably wealthy. Archaeological evidence suggests that robbers managed to enter Tutankhamun's tomb at least twice. Fortunately for history, they never had enough time to carry away its greatest treasures. Officials appear to have discovered the break-ins quickly. The stolen entrance was repaired, new seals were placed on the doorway, and the tomb was closed once again. These repairs would unknowingly help preserve one of history's greatest collections of ancient artifacts. As decades passed, new pharaohs were buried throughout the Valley of the Kings. Construction workers dug fresh tombs. Stone chips, broken limestone, and debris gradually covered older entrances. Nature quietly joined the effort. flash floods swept rocks and sand across the valley. The desert wind carried more layers of dust. Generation after generation passed. Eventually, the exact location of Tutankhamun's tomb disappeared beneath the ground. His name slowly faded from memory as well. Later rulers deliberately erased many traces of the Amarna period, the era associated with Akhenaten's religious revolution. Names were removed from monuments, statues were destroyed. Official king lists often ignored rulers connected with those controversial years. Tutankhamun became one of the forgotten kings. Ironically, that forgetfulness became his greatest protection. While larger and more famous royal tombs attracted generations of determined robbers, Tutankhamun's modest burial place remained hidden beneath layers of rubble. The centuries turned into millennia. The mighty Egyptian empire vanished. Foreign dynasties ruled the Nile. The Greeks arrived under Alexander the Great. The Romans followed. Later came Arab rulers, Ottoman governors, European explorers, and modern archaeologists. Empires rose, empires collapsed, civilizations changed. Yet beneath the silent valley, the young king continued to rest undisturbed. By the 19th century, European interest in ancient Egypt had reached extraordinary levels. Travelers filled books with descriptions of mysterious temples and colossal statues. Collectors searched for ancient artifacts. Museums competed to acquire Egyptian treasures. Archaeologists began exploring the Valley of the Kings with increasing determination. Many believed nearly every important tomb had already been discovered. The valley had been excavated repeatedly. Dozens of royal tombs were known. Some experts confidently declared that little of significance remained hidden. One man refused to accept that conclusion. His name was Howard Carter. Unlike many treasure hunters of his era, Carter possessed exceptional artistic skill and remarkable patience. He began his career copying wall paintings inside Egyptian tombs, carefully recording details that others overlooked. Over time, he developed a deep understanding of ancient Egyptian archaeology. Carter became convinced that one royal tomb was still missing: the tomb of Tutankhamun. Historical records mention the young king, but no confirmed burial place had ever been found. Carter believed it still existed somewhere beneath the Valley of the Kings. His search attracted the support of a wealthy English aristocrat, Lord Carnarvon, who agreed to finance the excavation. Season after season, workers dug through layers of stone and sand. They uncovered ancient huts, broken pottery, fragments of tools, discarded building materials, but no royal tomb. Years passed, expenses increased. Results remained disappointing. Eventually, Lord Carnarvon began losing confidence. After spending a fortune with little to show for it, he informed Carter that he would finance only one final excavation season. If nothing appeared, the search would end forever. For Carter, it was the last opportunity. In November 1922, workers began clearing an area near the tomb of Ramesses VI. The location seemed unremarkable. Many archaeologists believed it had already been thoroughly explored. Yet Carter trusted his instincts. On November 4th, everything changed. a young water carrier reportedly noticed the top of a stone step emerging from beneath the sand. As workers carefully removed more debris, additional steps appeared. Each new step descended deeper into the earth. Excitement spread through the excavation team. At the bottom of the staircase stood a sealed doorway. Stamped into the ancient plaster were the royal seals of the necropolis. Carter immediately realized that this discovery might be extraordinary. Rather than breaking through immediately, he chose caution. The entrance was carefully reburied to protect it from looters. A telegram was sent to Lord Carnarvon in England. Its message was brief but unforgettable. At last, have made wonderful discovery in Valley. A magnificent tomb with seals intact. Lord Carnarvon traveled to Egypt as quickly as possible. For several anxious weeks, Carter waited. Finally, on November 26, 1922, the small group gathered before the sealed doorway. The plaster was carefully removed. A tiny opening appeared. Carter inserted a candle through the hole. Hot air escaped from the darkness. For a moment his eyes struggled to adjust, then shapes slowly emerged from the shadows. Golden beds, black guardian statues, carved furniture, beautiful chariots, boxes stacked upon boxes, objects glittering everywhere the candlelight touched. Lord Carnarvon, unable to contain his excitement, reportedly asked the question that has echoed through history. "Can you see anything?" Howard Carter's reply became one of archaeology's most famous quotations. "Yes, wonderful things." At that moment, the modern world looked into a royal chamber that had remained hidden for more than 3,000 years. What Carter could not yet see was that this was only the beginning. Beyond that first room lay sealed chambers, untouched treasures, and one of the greatest archaeological mysteries ever uncovered. A discovery that would soon capture the imagination of the entire world and give birth to the legend of the curse of the Pharaoh. The moment Howard Carter looked through that small opening in the sealed doorway, history changed forever. For several seconds, no one spoke. The warm air that escaped from the chamber had been trapped inside for more than 3,000 years. Dust floated gently through the narrow opening as Carter held his candle higher, trying to understand what he was seeing. Everywhere he looked, objects reflected the faint light. Golden couches shaped like sacred animals. Beautifully carved chariots. Large ceremonial boxes. Ivory chairs. Statues standing silently as if they had been guarding the young king since the day of his burial. The room appeared crowded almost beyond belief. It looked less like a carefully arranged museum and more like a royal household that had been packed in great haste. That detail immediately puzzled Carter. Most royal tombs discovered before this one had already been robbed centuries earlier. Their treasures were gone, leaving only empty chambers and damaged sarcophagi. Tutankhamun's tomb was different. Although ancient thieves had entered at least twice, they had stolen surprisingly little before being interrupted. Officials had repaired the damage and sealed the entrance again. As a result, Carter stood before something no archaeologist had ever truly experienced, an almost intact royal burial. But Carter understood that excitement could easily destroy history. Instead of rushing inside and removing objects, he ordered careful documentation. Every artifact had to be photographed. Every object had to be numbered. Every position had to be recorded exactly as it was found. The task was enormous. The first chamber alone contained hundreds of priceless items stacked on top of one another in ways that suggested the funeral had been completed quickly. Nothing could be moved carelessly. Weeks turned into months as archaeologists slowly examined each object. The treasures seemed endless. Magnificent wooden chariots decorated with gold leaf, elegant folding chairs, decorated beds shaped like divine animals, ceremonial fans made from ostrich feathers, walking sticks, jewelry, weapons, musical instruments, games, beautifully painted boxes containing clothing and personal possessions. Every object revealed another detail about life inside the royal palace over 3,000 years earlier. Some discoveries surprised even experienced Egyptologists. Among the king's belongings were more than 100 walking sticks. Many showed clear signs of use. Their worn surfaces suggested they had not been placed in the tomb merely for decoration. Instead, they may have supported Tutankhamun during everyday life. This evidence strengthened the growing belief that the young king suffered from physical difficulties long before his death. The clothing found inside the tomb offered another remarkable glimpse into royal life. Fine linen garments remained folded inside beautifully crafted chests. Leather sandals still survived, gloves, undergarments, ceremonial robes. Even simple personal items had been preserved by the dry Egyptian climate. Each object transformed Tutankhamun from a distant historical figure into a real human being. He had dressed each morning, he had worn jewelry, he had hunted, he had attended ceremonies, he had played games, he had lived. One room led to another. Beyond the antechamber stood a smaller annex filled with food, oils, perfumes, baskets, and household supplies intended for use in the afterlife. Nearby, another sealed doorway guarded the burial chamber itself. Months passed before Carter finally reached it. When the doorway was opened, a breathtaking sight appeared. Unlike the first chamber, this room was dominated by enormous gilded wooden shrines. One stood inside another like giant nesting boxes. Each shrine had been assembled around the king's sarcophagus before the tomb was sealed. The shrines nearly filled the entire burial chamber, leaving very little space to move around them. It took weeks simply to dismantle them safely. Every panel carried beautiful religious scenes. Protective gods stretched out their wings. Sacred inscriptions covered the surfaces. The artwork reflected Egyptian beliefs about resurrection and eternal life. After removing the outer shrines, Carter finally reached the stone sarcophagus. Its massive quartzite lid rested silently where ancient workers had placed it over 3,000 years earlier. Inside rested 3 nested coffins. The outer 2 were crafted from gilded wood. The third astonished everyone. It was made from solid gold. Weighing well over 100 kilograms, It represented one of the greatest achievements of ancient Egyptian craftsmanship. When archaeologists carefully lifted the golden lid, they came face to face with the object that would become the symbol of ancient Egypt itself, the golden funerary mask of Tutankhamun. Its calm expression seemed almost alive. The polished gold reflected light with extraordinary warmth. Blue lapis lazuli formed elegant stripes across the royal headdress. The cobra and vulture rose proudly from the forehead, protecting the king for eternity. The ears were pierced, perhaps reflecting the young age of the pharaoh. Every detail displayed astonishing artistic perfection. Even today, the mask remains one of the most recognizable works of art ever created. Beneath the mask lay the carefully wrapped mummy of the young king. Unfortunately, Carter faced an unexpected problem. The ancient embalmers had poured large quantities of dark resin over the mummy during the burial ceremony. Over thousands of years, the resin hardened like glue. The linen wrappings had become firmly attached to the solid gold coffin. Separating them without damage proved almost impossible. Using the methods available in the 1920s, Carter's team was forced to proceed in ways that modern archaeologists would never consider acceptable. Some wrappings were carefully cut. Certain sections had to be separated mechanically. Although these actions caused damage to the mummy, Carter believed he had no practical alternative with the technology of his time. Today, archaeologists use advanced imaging techniques whenever possible to avoid such invasive methods. Even after the mummy was examined, mysteries continued to emerge. Beautiful amulets lay hidden between the linen bandages. Gold finger coverings protected every finger. Golden sandals rested upon the king's feet. Jewelry surrounded his neck and chest. More than 150 individual objects accompanied the mummy itself. Each possessed religious significance. Each represented another layer of protection for eternity. As newspapers around the world reported Carter's discoveries, public fascination reached extraordinary levels. People who had never before shown interest in archaeology suddenly became captivated by ancient Egypt. Museums organized exhibitions. Books became bestsellers. Egyptian-inspired fashion appeared across Europe and America. Jewelry, architecture, furniture, and even hairstyles reflected what newspapers called Tut mania. Yet alongside admiration came something far darker. Within months of opening the tomb, strange rumors began spreading. Some claimed that disturbing the resting place of an ancient pharaoh would bring terrible consequences. Then an unexpected death seemed to confirm their fears. Almost overnight, newspapers around the world began reporting a terrifying legend. They called it the Curse of the Pharaoh. When news of Tutankhamun's tomb spread across the world, newspapers competed to publish every new detail. Readers could not get enough of the young pharaoh whose treasures had remained hidden for more than 3,000 years. Then, just as excitement reached its peak, tragedy struck. In April 1923, only a few months after the opening of the tomb, Lord Carnarvon died in Cairo.
Officially, the cause was blood poisoning that developed after an infected mosquito bite became worse when he accidentally cut the bite while shaving. The infection spread rapidly, and despite medical treatment, he passed away. His death alone would have been a sad but ordinary event. Instead, it became the beginning of one of history's most famous legends. Almost immediately, newspapers began connecting his death to Tutankhamun's tomb. Some journalists claimed that mysterious events had surrounded Carnarvon's final hours. Stories spread that the lights of Cairo suddenly went out at the exact moment he died. Others claimed that his pet dog in England howled before collapsing dead at precisely the same time. Another rumor suggested that a strange mark appeared on Carnarvon's cheek in exactly the same place where Tutankhamun's mummy had a wound. These stories traveled around the world with incredible speed. Most of them were impossible to verify. Some were almost certainly exaggerated. Others were simply invented to sell newspapers. But they achieved something remarkable. People began believing that the tomb itself was cursed. Soon, reporters searched for every unusual accident connected to the excavation. If an archaeologist became ill, it was blamed on the curse. If someone suffered an accident years later, the curse received the credit. If an elderly visitor died from natural causes long afterward, newspapers still linked the event to Tutankhamun. The list of supposed victims grew longer with every passing year. Yet when historians carefully examined the evidence, the story became much less mysterious. Howard Carter himself, the man who actually entered the tomb, handled the treasures, and supervised the excavation, did not die shortly afterward. He lived for another 17 years. He passed away in 1939 at the age of 64 from lymphoma. Many members of the excavation team also lived long lives. Several archaeologists who worked inside the tomb survived for decades. Doctors, photographers, museum experts, Egyptian workers, most experienced no unusual misfortune at all. This raised an obvious question. If the curse truly existed, why did it spare the very people who spent the most time inside the tomb? The answer suggested that the curse was probably a creation of imagination rather than reality. Even so, the legend refused to disappear. Some researchers proposed scientific explanations for why people might have become ill after entering ancient tombs. For thousands of years, sealed burial chambers remained closed to outside air. Inside, mold spores, bacteria, and fungi could survive in dark, humid conditions. When archaeologists first opened the chambers, those microscopic organisms might have become airborne. Modern studies have identified certain molds capable of causing illness, especially in people with weakened immune systems. However, there is no convincing evidence that such microorganisms caused the famous deaths associated with Tutankhamun's tomb. Others suggested that toxic gases trapped inside sealed chambers might have played a role. Again, scientific investigations have found little evidence to support that idea. In reality, many of the people connected with the excavation simply died from ordinary illnesses over the course of many years. Because the discovery attracted worldwide attention, every death received extraordinary publicity. ordinary coincidence gradually transformed into supernatural legend. Ancient Egyptian inscriptions also contributed to the mystery. Many tombs contained protective texts warning against disturbing the dead. These inscriptions were not unusual. They reflected religious beliefs that the deceased deserved peace and protection. One often quoted phrase claimed, "Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king." Despite appearing in countless books and films, researchers have never found this exact inscription inside Tutankhamun's tomb. It appears to have been created or exaggerated long after the discovery. The real inscriptions focused on protecting the king's journey into the afterlife rather than threatening future archaeologists. Still, the legend became stronger than the facts. Hollywood embraced the idea. Novelists wrote thrilling stories about cursed mummies. Adventure films introduced mysterious priests, ancient spells, and supernatural revenge. The image of the mummy's curse became one of the most recognizable themes in popular culture. Millions of people who knew almost nothing about Egyptian history became familiar with the curse. Ironically, the legend often overshadowed the real achievements of ancient Egyptian civilization. The extraordinary engineering, the artistic brilliance, the religious philosophy, the remarkable craftsmanship. All were sometimes forgotten beneath sensational stories of supernatural punishment. Yet Tutankhamun's tomb continued to reveal genuine mysteries, far more fascinating than fictional curses. Among them was one puzzling question that archaeologists could not ignore. Why did such an important king receive such a relatively small tomb? The layout seemed unusual. The decoration differed from many other royal burials. Some walls appeared to hide subtle architectural clues. Decades later, advanced scanning technology would encourage some Egyptologists to suggest an astonishing possibility. Perhaps Tutankhamun's tomb was not complete. Perhaps hidden chambers still existed behind its painted walls. And if those chambers were real, who or what might still be waiting inside them after more than 3,000 years? For decades after Howard Carter completed the excavation, many historians believed that Tutankhamun's tomb had revealed all of its secrets. Every major object had been cataloged. Thousands of photographs had been taken. The treasures had been carefully conserved. Researchers from around the world continued studying every artifact, every inscription, and every piece of jewelry. It seemed that the mystery was finally complete. But archaeology has a remarkable habit of asking new questions just when old ones appear to have been answered. One question refused to disappear. Why was Tutankhamun's tomb so small? Compared with the magnificent tombs prepared for many other pharaohs of the New Kingdom, Cave 62, the official name of Tutankhamun's tomb, was surprisingly modest. Its corridors were shorter, its chambers were fewer. Its decoration covered only selected walls. Everything suggested that the tomb had been prepared in great haste. Many Egyptologists believed that Tutankhamun died unexpectedly before a grand royal tomb could be completed. According to this theory, officials adapted an already existing tomb, expanded it where possible, and buried the young king quickly so that religious traditions could be fulfilled. For many years, that explanation seemed reasonable. Then modern technology introduced a surprising new possibility. Instead of relying only on visible walls, archaeologists began using high-resolution digital photography, laser mapping, and radar scanning. These methods allowed researchers to examine the tomb without damaging it. In 2015, British Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves proposed an extraordinary theory. After carefully studying detailed digital images of the burial chamber, he noticed faint, straight lines beneath the painted plaster. To him, they resembled the outlines of sealed, ancient doorways. If he was correct, the walls themselves might be hiding additional rooms. The idea immediately attracted worldwide attention. Reeves suggested something even more astonishing. He proposed that Tutankhamun's burial chamber might represent only the outer portion of a much larger tomb. Beyond the hidden walls, he believed another royal burial could still exist. And not just any burial. He suggested it might belong to one of ancient Egypt's most famous queens, Nefertiti. The name alone captured the world's imagination. Queen Nefertiti remains one of the most recognizable figures of ancient Egypt. Her beautifully sculpted limestone bust is celebrated as one of history's greatest artistic masterpieces. She was the great royal wife of Akhenaten and played a central role during Egypt's religious revolution. Yet despite her fame, her final resting place has never been confirmed. No undisputed tomb has ever been identified. If Nefertiti truly rested behind the walls of Tutankhamun's tomb, it would rank among the greatest archaeological discoveries of modern times. Excitement spread rapidly. Several radar surveys were conducted inside KV-62. Early results appeared encouraging. Some specialists believe they detected empty spaces beyond the painted walls. Newspaper headlines around the world announced the possibility of hidden chambers. The mystery grew even deeper. Could Howard Carter have unknowingly stopped only a few meters away from an even greater discovery? Could another untouched royal burial still lie hidden after more than 3,000 years? For a moment it seemed possible. However, science requires caution. Additional surveys using improved equipment produced conflicting results. Some radar specialists reported no convincing evidence of hidden rooms. Others argued that natural variations in the limestone could easily create misleading signals. Different teams reached different conclusions. The debate continues even today. At present, no hidden chamber has been confirmed behind the walls of Tutankhamun's burial chamber. The theory remains fascinating but unproven. This uncertainty reminds us that archaeology rarely provides simple answers. Every new technology offers fresh possibilities, but careful evidence must always guide conclusions. While researchers searched for hidden rooms, others focused on the thousands of artifacts recovered from the tomb. Each object told another chapter of the young king's life. His famous golden throne displayed intimate scenes of Tutankhamun and Ankhesenamun together. Unlike the formal images common in royal art, these scenes showed warmth and affection. The queen gently touched the king as sunlight from the Aten reached towards them. The artwork reflected both personal closeness and the lingering influence of the Amarna artistic style. Elsewhere, beautifully crafted bows, arrows, shields, and ceremonial daggers suggested that the king valued hunting and royal traditions. One dagger attracted particular scientific interest. Its blade appeared unlike ordinary Egyptian iron. For many years, scholars wondered where the metal had come from. Modern chemical analysis eventually produced an astonishing answer. The iron contained unusually high levels of nickel and cobalt, elements commonly found in meteorites. The dagger had almost certainly been forged from metal that had fallen from the sky. To the ancient Egyptians, such material must have seemed truly divine. Long before iron became common through mining and smelting, meteorite iron represented one of the rarest materials on Earth. Holding that dagger today is like holding a fragment of space transformed into royal craftsmanship. Every treasure from the tomb continues to reveal new information as scientific methods improve. Tiny traces of pollen help identify ancient plants. Residues inside jars reveal forgotten perfumes. Textile analysis explains how royal clothing was woven.
DNA studies identify family relationships. CT scans examine injuries without disturbing fragile remains. Each generation of researchers uncovers details that earlier scholars could never have imagined. Yet despite all these advances, the central mysteries remain remarkably resilient. Why did Tutankhamun die so young? Was illness the main cause? Did an accident seal his fate? Could political intrigue have played a hidden role? Why was his tomb so unusual? And are all of its secrets truly known? The answers remain just beyond complete certainty. Perhaps that is why the young king continues to fascinate the modern world. More than 3,000 years after his death, Tutankhamun still challenges historians, scientists, archaeologists, and dreamers alike. And in the final chapter of this story, we will explore how his discovery transformed our understanding of ancient Egypt forever, and why his legacy continues to inspire new generations across the world. Even after nearly a century of scientific research, King Tutankhamun continues to surprise the world. Every generation of archaeologists has examined his tomb with new technology, hoping to answer questions that Howard Carter could never have imagined asking. Instead of bringing complete certainty, each new discovery has revealed just how much remains unknown. One of the greatest mysteries concerns the treasures themselves. More than 5,000 objects were recovered from the tomb, and almost every one of them tells a different story. Some were clearly made specifically for Tutankhamun. Others appeared to have belonged to earlier members of the royal family before being altered for the young king's burial. Several pieces of jewelry contain inscriptions that seem to have been changed. Some names were carefully erased. Others were replaced. In a few cases, experts believe craftsmen simply modified existing royal objects because there was not enough time to create entirely new ones after Tutankhamun's unexpected death. This has led historians to believe that the royal workshop worked day and night to prepare the burial.
Every craftsman understood the importance of completing the king's tomb before the 70-day mummification period ended. The result was extraordinary. Despite the pressure, the quality of the workmanship remained astonishing. Gold-covered furniture with incredible precision. Glass was colored to imitate precious stones. Delicate carvings decorated even ordinary-looking boxes. Nothing was considered too simple for a king preparing to enter eternity. Among the most fascinating discoveries were the ceremonial chariots. Several beautifully preserved examples stood inside the tomb. Some were built for formal processions. Others were lightweight enough for hunting or travel. The wheels, carefully designed with 6 spokes, reflected advanced engineering that allowed speed without sacrificing strength. Modern craftsmen studying these chariots continue to admire the skill of ancient Egyptian builders. Nearby stood beautifully carved beds, decorated with images of sacred animals. One resembled a lion, another represented the heavenly cow goddess, a third carried symbols connected with divine protection. These were not ordinary beds. They reflected the Egyptian belief that every object placed in the tomb would accompany the king into the next life. Food was also essential. Large storage jars contained wine, baskets held grains, containers preserved oils and perfumes. Meat, fruits, bread, and honey were carefully prepared for the journey beyond death. The Egyptians believed that life after death would resemble life on earth. If the king needed food in this world, he would surely need food in the next. The walls of the burial chamber reinforced these beliefs. Although the decoration inside Tutankhamun's tomb is simpler than that found in some larger royal tombs, every painted figure carries deep religious meaning. The gods welcome the young king. Sacred rituals guide him toward eternal life. Osiris, ruler of the underworld, appears as the divine king with whom every deceased pharaoh hoped to unite. The paintings are calm rather than dramatic. They emphasize rebirth instead of fear. To ancient Egyptians, death was not a terrifying end. It was the beginning of another existence. Modern visitors often focus on the gold. Ancient Egyptians focused on eternity. As researchers continued examining the tomb throughout the 20th century, another surprising fact became clear. Tutankhamun himself had probably been buried with far more wealth than even Carter originally realized. Some organic materials had decayed. Certain fabrics had become fragile. Perfumes had dried away. Flowers placed around the mummy had turned to dust. Yet enough survived to demonstrate the extraordinary care invested in every detail of the burial. Each object represented not only wealth but also belief. Together they formed a complete vision of how ancient Egyptians imagined immortality. Even today, scientists continue finding new information hidden within those ancient treasures. The story of Tutankhamun is far from over. Every new study reminds us that history is never truly finished. Sometimes the greatest discoveries are still waiting to be made, not beneath the sand, but within the evidence that has been in front of us all along. As the 20th century progressed, Tutankhamun's tomb became more than an archaeological discovery. It became a global symbol of ancient Egypt itself. Millions of people who had never traveled to Egypt could instantly recognize the young king's golden mask. Museums, history books, documentaries, and classrooms around the world introduced new generations to the remarkable story of the forgotten pharaoh whose resting place had survived the passage of time. Yet behind the worldwide fame, scientists continued asking difficult questions. Who was Tutankhamun beyond the gold? What kind of person had he really been? To answer those questions, researchers turned to one of the most powerful tools available, modern forensic science. In the early years after the discovery, archaeologists could only study the mummy through direct physical examination. That process sometimes caused unavoidable damage because the technology simply did not exist to see inside the body without disturbing it. Everything changed with medical imaging. In 1968, X-ray examinations revealed new details about the king's skeleton. Decades later, far more advanced CT scans produced thousands of detailed cross-sectional images, allowing scientists to create three-dimensional reconstructions of Tutankhamun's body without unwrapping the mummy again. The scans confirmed that he was a young man, not much older than a modern teenager. His height was approximately 167 centimeters, or about 5 feet 6 inches. His wisdom teeth had not fully emerged, supporting estimates that he died around 18 or 19 years of age. Researchers also examined his bones for signs of disease or injury. Evidence suggested that one foot may have suffered from a congenital deformity, making walking painful. This finding matched the discovery of the many walking sticks found inside the tomb. Some sticks were beautifully decorated for ceremonial occasions. Others showed clear signs of daily use. Together they painted the picture of a king who may have relied on them regularly, rather than simply carrying them as symbols of authority. The CT scans also revealed the severe fracture in his left leg. Whether that injury happened during an accident shortly before death or occurred after death remains debated, but many experts believe it happened while he was still alive. If so, infection could have developed rapidly. Combined with malaria and possible inherited health conditions, such an injury may have proved fatal. The more scientists learned, the more human Tutankhamun became. Instead of imagining an invincible ruler surrounded only by gold, historians began seeing a young man facing real physical challenges. Despite those difficulties, he fulfilled the role expected of a pharaoh. He attended religious ceremonies. He restored Egypt's traditional temples. He represented royal authority during one of the kingdom's most difficult periods. His reign lasted only about 9 years. By the standards of Egyptian history, it was brief. Yet its importance was greater than anyone could have imagined. Ironically, Tutankhamun became famous not because of what he accomplished during life, but because of what remained after death. His tomb preserved an entire chapter of ancient Egyptian civilization. Without it, historians would know far less about royal craftsmanship, burial traditions, religion, clothing, furniture, weapons, medicine, art, and daily life during the 18th dynasty.
Every artifact became a historical document. Every object answered questions while creating new ones. And even today, laboratories across the world continue studying samples connected to the young king using technologies that Howard Carter could never have imagined. More than a century after the discovery, Tutankhamun continues to teach us that history is never truly silent. Sometimes it simply waits patiently beneath the sands until the world is ready to listen. As scientific knowledge expanded during the 21st century, researchers began looking beyond Tutankhamun himself. They wanted to understand the entire royal family that surrounded him. Every relationship, every marriage, and every generation could provide new clues about the young king's life and mysterious death. For centuries, historians relied mainly on inscriptions carved into temples and monuments. Those records were valuable, but they were often incomplete or intentionally altered by later rulers. Now, DNA analysis offered an entirely different source of evidence. Carefully collected genetic samples from several royal mummies allowed scientists to compare family relationships in ways that had never before been possible. The results confirmed that Tutankhamun belonged to one of the most complex royal families in Egyptian history. Evidence strongly indicated that his father was Akhenaten, the pharaoh who had transformed Egypt's religion by promoting the worship of the Aten above all other gods. His mother, however, remains less certain. DNA suggests she was a close relative of Akhenaten, most likely one of his sisters. Such marriages within the royal family were common among Egyptian rulers, who believed that preserving the royal bloodline strengthened their divine right to rule. While this tradition may have protected dynastic succession, modern researchers believe it also increased the likelihood of inherited health conditions. Some specialists argue that these genetic factors may explain several of the physical challenges identified in Tutankhamun's remains. Others caution that ancient DNA studies are extremely difficult, and conclusions should always be treated carefully. The debate continues. Another deeply emotional discovery came from two tiny mummies found inside Tutankhamun's tomb. Both were female infants. Modern examinations suggest they were likely the daughters of Tutankhamun and Queen Enkisenamun. Neither survived birth. Although they never lived long enough to become part of Egypt's royal history, they were buried beside their father with the same care and respect given to members of the royal family. Their presence adds a deeply human dimension to the story. Behind the gold, the ceremonies, and the legends was a young couple who experienced profound personal loss. If even one of those children had survived, the history of Egypt might have followed a completely different path. Instead, the royal line ended. After Tutankhamun's death, I became pharaoh. Following I's reign, Horemheb eventually took the throne. One of Horemheb's major goals was restoring political stability after the turbulent Amarna period. To accomplish that, many monuments connected with Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, I, and others from that era were dismantled or altered. Official king lists often skipped their names entirely. In effect, later rulers attempted to erase an entire chapter of Egyptian history. Ironically, this effort to erase Tutankhamun from memory
may have helped preserve his legacy. Because later kings focused attention on their own monuments rather than celebrating Tutankhamun, his relatively modest tomb remained hidden beneath the debris of later construction. While larger royal tombs attracted thieves over many centuries, the young king's burial escaped widespread destruction. What began as political erasure became archaeological preservation. It is one of history's greatest ironies. Today, visitors from every corner of the world travel to Egypt, hoping to learn about Tutankhamun. His story bridges ancient history and modern science. It combines archaeology, medicine, religion, politics, art, and mystery into a single, remarkable narrative. Yet, despite decades of research, historians continue asking the same fundamental questions. Exactly how did he die? Why was his tomb prepared so quickly? Were there hidden political struggles inside the palace? Could future discoveries finally reveal the complete truth? Perhaps the greatest lesson of Tutankhamun's story is that history is never finished. Every generation asks new questions. Every new technology uncovers fresh evidence. And every answer reminds us that the past still holds countless secrets waiting to be discovered. More than 100 years have passed since Howard Carter first peered through the small opening into Tutankhamun's tomb, yet the fascination surrounding the young pharaoh has never faded. If anything, it has grown stronger with each passing decade. Today, archaeology is no longer limited to brushes, shovels, and notebooks. Scientists now use laser scanning, digital mapping, high-resolution photography, portable X-ray equipment, 3D modeling, chemical analysis, DNA sequencing, and artificial intelligence to study ancient remains without causing unnecessary damage. Each new technology has revealed another layer of Tutankhamun's story. Researchers have examined the wood used to build his furniture. They have identified pigments used in the colorful paintings. They have analyzed traces of ancient perfumes preserved inside sealed jars. Even microscopic pollen grains found within the tomb have helped scientists understand the plants and flowers placed around the king during his funeral. Nothing is considered too small to study. Every fragment of evidence has the potential to answer questions that have remained unsolved for thousands of years. The treasures themselves continue to astonish experts. The famous Golden Throne remains one of the finest examples of royal furniture ever discovered. Its detailed decoration captures a peaceful moment between Tutankhamun and Queen Ankhesenamun. Unlike the formal images carved on temple walls, the scene feels personal. The queen gently applies perfume or ointment to the king while sunlight shines upon them. It is one of the rare occasions in ancient Egyptian royal art where affection appears so naturally expressed. Nearby, archaeologists found beautifully decorated game boards. These were not placed in the tomb simply for decoration. The Egyptians believed games could provide entertainment in the afterlife, just as they did during earthly life. Bows, arrows, shields, and ceremonial weapons reflected the king's role as protector of Egypt, even if his physical health may have limited his activities. Jewelry demonstrated extraordinary artistic skill. Necklaces made from gold, turquoise, lapis lazuli, carnelian, feldspar, and colored glass revealed the incredible craftsmanship of ancient Egyptian goldsmiths. Many techniques used over 3,000 years ago remain impressive, even by modern standards. One remarkable feature of Tutankhamun's burial is the sheer variety of objects. Nothing appears random. Everything served a symbolic purpose. Beds represented rest. Boats symbolized travel through the afterlife. Walking sticks offered support. Food ensured nourishment. Musical instruments provided celebration. Statues acted as magical guardians. Amulets offered divine protection. Every item reflected the Egyptian belief that eternal life required preparation just as carefully as life on earth. Historians often describe Tutankhamun's tomb as a time capsule. Unlike many archaeological sites where only fragments survive, his burial preserved an entire royal world. Looking inside the tomb is like stepping directly into the 18th dynasty. It allows us to understand not only how kings were buried, but also how they lived. Their furniture, their clothing, their jewelry, their technology, their religious beliefs, their artistic achievements. Few discoveries in world history have contributed so much knowledge from a single excavation. Even today, important conservation work continues. Ancient materials remain fragile. Changes in temperature, humidity, and human activity can slowly damage priceless artifacts. For this reason, museums and conservation specialists devote enormous effort to preserving Tutankhamun's legacy for future generations. The young king himself remains inside the Valley of the Kings. Unlike many of the treasures that have been displayed in museums, his mummy still rests within his original tomb under carefully controlled conditions. Visitors who enter the burial chamber often experience a powerful sense of connection with history. They stand only a few steps away from a ruler who died more than 33 centuries ago. Few places on earth offer such a direct encounter with the ancient world. Yet, despite everything that has been discovered, Tutankhamun continues to guard some of his greatest secrets. Science has answered many questions. History has filled countless gaps, but absolute certainty remains impossible. Perhaps that is why his story continues to inspire books, documentaries, films, and archaeological research around the globe. The mystery has never truly ended. It has simply evolved. And in the next chapter, we will bring together every clue from his childhood and mysterious death to the astonishing discovery of his tomb and explore why King Tutankhamun remains one of the most unforgettable figures in all of human history. History often remembers the greatest conquerors, the most powerful emperors, and the rulers who changed the course of civilizations through war. Tutankhamun was none of those. He did not build monuments on the scale of the Great Pyramids. He did not lead legendary military campaigns across continents. And he did not rule Egypt for decades, yet more than 3,000 years after his death. His name is known in every corner of the world. This remarkable legacy is one of history's greatest paradoxes. Had tomb robbers succeeded in carrying away every treasure from his burial chamber, Tutankhamun might have remained little more than a forgotten name carved into damaged monuments. Instead, chance changed everything. The hidden entrance to his tomb disappeared beneath layers of stone and debris left by later construction in the Valley of the Kings. What once seemed like an unfortunate location became the greatest protection imaginable. Generation after generation walked above the buried entrance without realizing that one of history's richest archaeological discoveries lay only a few meters below their feet. When Howard Carter uncovered the first stone step in November 1922, he was not simply finding another royal tomb. He was opening a doorway into an entire civilization. Unlike many archaeological sites that survive only as ruins, Tutankhamun's tomb preserved the personal world of an ancient king. His clothes, his jewelry, his furniture, his weapons, his toys, his food, his walking sticks, his ceremonial equipment. Even the flowers placed upon his coffin during the funeral had left traces that scientists could still study thousands of years later. Few discoveries have offered such an intimate connection with the ancient past. The famous golden mask became the symbol of ancient Egypt, but it also became something more. It reminded the modern world that great civilizations are remembered not only through battles and empires, but also through art, craftsmanship, belief, and culture. Behind every piece of gold stood an artisan whose name has been lost to history. Behind every painted wall stood generations of priests preserving sacred traditions. Behind every carefully wrapped amulet stood a belief that death was not the end of existence. Tutankhamun's tomb became a lesson in how an entire civilization understood life itself. Modern science has transformed our understanding of the young king. CT scans replaced speculation with detailed anatomical evidence. DNA research revealed family relationships once hidden for thousands of years. Chemical analysis identified materials that came from distant lands, and even from meteorites that had fallen from space. Laser mapping documented every corner of the tomb with extraordinary precision. Artificial intelligence is now helping researchers analyze inscriptions, damaged texts, and fragile artifacts more efficiently than ever before. Each new generation continues the work that Howard Carter began over a century ago. Yet perhaps the most important discovery is not hidden within gold or precious stones. It is hidden within the questions that remain unanswered. Exactly what happened during Tutankhamun's final days? Did illness alone claim his life? Did a serious injury become fatal? Were political struggles unfolding behind palace walls? Will future technology reveal hidden chambers inside KV-62? Could the final resting place of Queen Nefertiti still await discovery somewhere beneath the Valley of the Kings? No historian can answer these questions with complete certainty. And perhaps that uncertainty explains why Tutankhamun's story refuses to fade. History usually ends with answers. Tutankhamun's story ends with possibilities. Every excavation season in Egypt carries the hope of another extraordinary discovery. Every scientific breakthrough offers another opportunity to examine old evidence in new ways. every generation brings fresh curiosity. That curiosity has kept the young pharaoh alive in human memory for more than 33 centuries. His reign lasted less than a decade. His life ended before adulthood. His kingdom eventually disappeared, but his story became immortal. Long after the armies of ancient Egypt vanished, long after its temples fell into ruin, long after the language of the pharaohs could no longer be spoken, the face of a young king, hidden beneath a golden mask, continues to remind the world that history never truly sleeps. Sometimes it waits patiently beneath the sand until someone is willing to uncover its secrets. As the years continue to pass, Tutankhamun's story refuses to remain confined to history books. It has become a bridge between the ancient world and modern civilization, reminding us that every discovery raises new questions alongside new answers. Today, thousands of archaeologists work across Egypt, but the Valley of the Kings remains one of the most fascinating places on Earth. Beneath its rugged cliffs, dozens of royal tombs have already been uncovered, yet experts agree that the valley may still hold undiscovered chambers and hidden secrets. Every excavation begins with hope. Every stone that is carefully removed carries the possibility of revealing another forgotten chapter of history. Modern archaeologists work very differently from those of a century ago. Instead of rushing to uncover treasures, today's teams focus on preservation. Ground-penetrating radar scans the Earth before excavation begins. Drones create detailed maps of archaeological sites. Laser scanners record every wall down to the smallest crack. Three-dimensional digital models preserve information that future generations can study without touching the fragile monuments themselves. These advances have changed archaeology from treasure hunting into one of the world's most precise sciences. Tutankhamun's tomb has played a major role in that transformation. Howard Carter's meticulous notes, photographs, and cataloging methods became a model for future excavations. Although some techniques used in the 1920s would not be acceptable today, his commitment to documenting every object set new standards for archaeological research. The treasures themselves continue to travel the world through exhibitions, allowing millions of people to appreciate the extraordinary craftsmanship of ancient Egypt. For many visitors, seeing even a single object connected to Tutankhamun creates an unforgettable experience. The level of detail is astonishing. Tiny gold inlays, perfectly carved hieroglyphs, intricate jewelry, beautifully painted wooden chests. Every artifact reflects countless hours of skilled craftsmanship. These objects were never intended to be displayed in museums. They were created for eternity. They were meant to remain forever beside the young king. Yet their discovery has allowed humanity to understand an ancient civilization with remarkable clarity. Tutankhamun has also inspired countless students to become archaeologists, historians, conservators, and museum specialists. Many researchers have admitted that their fascination with ancient Egypt began after seeing the famous golden mask as children. One discovery inspired thousands of careers, One forgotten king reshaped the future of archaeology. Even now, scientific laboratories continue studying microscopic samples collected from the tomb decades ago. Advances in imaging technology reveal details invisible to earlier researchers. New conservation methods protect fragile materials that once seemed impossible to preserve. Artificial intelligence assists scholars in comparing inscriptions across thousands of ancient monuments. History continues to evolve. What seemed impossible 50 years ago has become routine today. What appears impossible now may become ordinary in the future. Perhaps one day, new technology will finally explain the exact cause of Tutankhamun's death. Perhaps hidden archives will reveal political events that have been lost for millennia. Perhaps another royal tomb will be discovered, providing the missing pieces of the story. Until that day arrives, Tutankhamun remains one of history's greatest mysteries. His life reminds us that fame is unpredictable. Some rulers spent 60 years on the throne and are remembered only by specialists. Tutankhamun ruled for less than a decade, yet his name has become known across the globe. His death remains mysterious. His burial remains extraordinary. His legacy remains timeless. And somewhere beneath the endless Egyptian sky, where the desert wind still moves across the Valley of the Kings, just as it did thousands of years ago, the story of the young pharaoh continues to inspire wonder, curiosity, and the endless human desire to understand the past. The deeper historians look into Tutankhamun's story, the more they realize that his greatest legacy is not simply the treasure discovered inside his tomb. His true legacy lies in the way his discovery transformed humanity's understanding of ancient Egypt. Before 1922, much of what people imagined about the pharaohs came from damaged temples, broken statues, and tombs that had long since been emptied by robbers. Tutankhamun changed that forever. For the first time, archaeologists could study an almost complete royal burial exactly as it had been prepared more than 3,000 years earlier. Every object had a purpose. Every chamber followed religious traditions. Every decoration reflected beliefs about life, death, and eternity. Nothing inside the tomb was accidental. Even the placement of ordinary-looking objects followed carefully planned rituals. The sandals beside the king, the bows and arrows, the ceremonial fans, the jewelry wrapped within layers of linen, the small amulets hidden between the bandages. Together they formed an invisible shield that the ancient Egyptians believed would protect their king throughout eternity. One fascinating detail continues to amaze researchers. Many of the treasures show signs of actual use. These were not cheap ceremonial copies made only for burial. The walking sticks carried scratches from years of handling. Some chairs displayed evidence of everyday wear. Certain pieces of clothing had clearly been worn during the king's lifetime. This suggests that Tutankhamun was buried not only with specially crafted funerary gifts, but also with treasured possessions from his own life. In many ways, the tomb resembles a carefully packed royal home prepared for an endless journey. Researchers have also learned much about ancient Egyptian trade. Materials found inside the tomb came from surprisingly distant regions. Gold arrived from Nubia. Cedar wood likely came from the mountains of Lebanon. Lapis lazuli traveled from what is now Afghanistan. Ivory reached Egypt through African trade routes. Fine oils, incense, and rare resins arrived from lands far beyond the Nile Valley. These discoveries reveal that ancient Egypt was connected to an international network of LTJRH and diplomacy, stretching across thousands of kilometers. The kingdom was far from isolated. It stood at the center of one of the ancient world's greatest exchange systems. Tutankhamun's burial also highlights the remarkable organization of Egyptian society. Craftsmen, stonecutters, goldsmiths, painters, priests, scribes, engineers, woodworkers, embalmers. Every profession contributed to preparing the young king for eternity. Hundreds of skilled people likely participated in creating the objects found inside the tomb. Most of their names have been lost, yet their work has survived longer than almost any monument they could have imagined. Today, visitors entering the Valley of the Kings often describe a feeling that is difficult to explain. The landscape itself appears timeless. The barren cliffs remain almost unchanged since the days when ancient workers carried heavy stones beneath the scorching Egyptian sun. Standing near the entrance of KV 62, it is easy to imagine Howard Carter waiting patiently before the sealed doorway, wondering whether years of effort had finally been rewarded. That moment continues to inspire archaeologists around the world. It reminds us that patience, careful observation, and determination can change history. Tutankhamun may never have imagined that people living more than 33 centuries after his death would still speak his name. Yet his story continues to unite science, history, archaeology, and human curiosity in a way few historical figures ever have. Even after decades of research, the young king still challenges us with unanswered questions. And perhaps that is the greatest treasure of all, not the gold, not the jewels, and not the magnificent mask, but the enduring mystery that encourages each new generation to keep searching for the truth. Every great historical mystery eventually reaches a point where the known facts and the unknown questions stand side by side. Tutankhamun's story is one of those rare mysteries. On one side we have extraordinary evidence. His tomb, his mummy, thousands of priceless objects, modern CT scans, DNA research, forensic analysis, historical inscriptions, and more than a century of archaeological study have revealed an incredible amount about his life and death. On the other side remain questions that may never receive complete answers. Exactly how did he die? Did malaria combined with a serious leg injury bring his life to an early end? Were inherited health conditions the result of generations of royal intermarriage? Did political struggles inside the palace influence the events that followed his death? Will hidden chambers ever be discovered inside or near KV 62? These mysteries continue to inspire debate among historians and archaeologists around the world. Perhaps future discoveries will provide clearer answers. Or perhaps some secrets disappeared forever, with the people who lived through those events more than 3,000 years ago. Yet the greatest lesson of Tutankhamun's story is not about mystery alone, it is about preservation. When Howard Carter entered the tomb in November 1922, he did more than discover magnificent treasures. He uncovered an entire chapter of human civilization. The objects inside the tomb revealed the extraordinary abilities of ancient Egyptian craftsmen. Goldsmiths shaped precious metals into works of astonishing beauty. Artists painted walls with scenes that still appear vibrant after more than 3 millennia. Woodworkers created furniture that combined elegance with engineering. Jewelry makers crafted ornaments whose precision continues to amaze modern experts. Priests carefully prepared every ritual according to beliefs that had been passed from one generation to another for centuries. Together they left behind a cultural legacy unlike any other. Tutankhamun's tomb reminds us that history is not only about kings, it is also about the countless ordinary people whose names have disappeared, the workers who carved the tomb, the craftsmen who built the golden shrines, the embalmers who preserved the king's body, the scribes who recorded sacred prayers, the laborers who carried heavy stones beneath the desert sun. Without them, the story would never have survived. Howard Carter himself once admitted that every discovery raises new questions. That observation remains true today. Even after decades of scientific progress, Tutankhamun continues to surprise researchers. New technologies reveal details invisible to earlier generations. Advanced imaging uncovers hidden features. Chemical analysis identifies materials from distant lands. DNA research reconstructs forgotten family relationships.